Remember that one time you got so mad that you asked your dad to murder every man, woman, and child of an entire city, then behead all of them, then pile all of those decapitated noggins into giant skull pyramids around the outside of the city? Your dad's army just burned to the ground. And then remember when your dad did that? I can't possibly know all the details of your life, but I do know that you haven't had that life experience because it's only happened once in recorded history, April 1221 in the ancient Persian city of Nishapur. Being the daughter of Genghis Khan had tremendous benefits if you were a vengeful, bloodthirsty sadist like Tagachar apparently was. Work can wait. It's time for a very bloody Mongol horde at their most destructive edition of Timesuck.
You're listening to Timesuck.
All right, first, I want to take a second and just to talk about like why we're talking about this just horribly bloody, just gory topic. And it's because I was trying to do a bit, not trying to do, actually ended up doing a bit on my new album, Don't Wake the Bear. Go get it if you haven't got it. People seem to like it. But there's this bit on there, it's track number 5, it's called Whiskey Laudanum Saw, and the premise is I get irritated when people complain about the supposed good old days being better than today, because that's just almost universally false. It's like certain things may have been better at certain times in history, but overall, like the farther you go back, just the worse it was to be a human. You know, there was consistently like less education. You know, I mean, there was blips, you know, it was kind of like a roller coaster education, like, you know, the Dark Ages in Europe would be, you know, worse than education was during the, you know, the height of some of the antiquity kind of empires of like, you know, Persia and Greeks and stuff, but nowhere near today. I mean, as smart as like the Greeks were, you know, they didn't have the web, they didn't have the level of science we have. I mean, they just didn't have it. And there was less medicine, you know, they didn't have antibiotics and all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, it just was worse. You know, basic, you know, human rights, you know, slavery was incredibly widespread for people of a variety of, you know, races and creeds. And it just, you know, murder was commonplace and brutal murder. And just to kind of make this point, this Battle of Nishapur did not stay in the bit, but I just did some Googling. This was like, you know, I don't know, 2 years ago. I did some Googling about history's worst atrocities. Like, what are the worst things that have happened to people in history, things like the Holocaust and just, you know, widespread horror, you know, like so under the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, the killings under Stalin. And I came across this one historical moment that I'd never heard about, and it was kind of hard to find. It took some digging to really find out more about it, but it was the Battle of Nishapur, the sacking of the city of Nishapur, which was a city I hadn't heard of, by the Mongols, who you know, they sacked a lot of cities and did a lot of killing, like so much that they reduced the carbon output considerably during the time they lived in. Like they killed so many people, they reduced pollution in a weird way. And but this one battle stood out because of the sheer volume of death in a very short amount of time. And then also just the way that people were killed, and then what was done to their bodies after they were killed, and the reason it all happened. It's so fucked up that it doesn't feel real, even though this is, you know, documented by numerous historians, by, you know, people of the day documented this in other battles, but it's fucking unreal. So strap in for today's episode. And before I get into this Battle of Nishapur, I want to just give a quick backstory on the military savagery of Genghis Khan at his height. And so a little bit of facts about him. Genghis, you know, he consolidated the Mongol Empire and came to power in 1206. The dude died in 1227, by which time the Mongol Empire ruled from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea, an empire twice the size of the Roman Empire and Muslim Caliphate. Like, historians not totally sure how he died, but it looks like, you know, injury sustained from falling off a horse the year before. Which, actually, horses is like a weird theme with Timesuck. In the last episode about the big one, turns out that rumor got started about that earthquake from a dude who fell off a horse's dream. So, you know, careful around horses. But we think that, but we do know that we don't know for sure if that's how he died, but we think it could have been that, or could have been injuries sustained in some battle or poison or something. But what we do know is in 1221 he was like full on expand the empire mode. I mean, they really just were so focused on just conquering fucking everything. Like they just wanted all of it. And it was an expansion area that would continue well past his death in an empire that at its height, this is so impressive, between 1270 and 1309 would encompass over 16% of all the land on Earth. Second only in history to the height of the British Empire, which in 1920, actually, I thought it would be earlier that they controlled more, but in 1920 they controlled over 23% of the Earth, over a quarter of the population. But, a lot of that British land was like, Canada, which, most of that land, Canada is uninhabitable, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Australia, most of it is very rural. Land masses, mostly unpopulated, and also inaccessible and unknown to the Khan. Like they literally didn't know about the Americas. So if they would have known about them, they probably would have fucking taken some boats over there and just fuck shit up, because that's just kind of what they did. So really, like in terms of dominating the known populations of your day, like no one ever dominated the earth like the 13th century Khans. And Genghis Khan himself, just while he was in power, conquered more than twice as much land as any other conqueror in history. And so this is kind of setting the backstory for this Battle of Nishapur. And here's how he did it. Here, because I was fascinated, how did they conquer so much? And a lot of it was they were masters of horseback archery in an era when most armies were stationary. So, you're some dude, you're some 13th century archer, and you're in your little row of other archers, and you got your chainmail, and you got some guy going, fire! You're shooting off these straight arrows, usually towards an advancing army who is just marching forward, which how much would that fucking suck? Like, I've thought about that just in armies in general back then. Like, part of strategy for these kings was like, yeah, fuck it, we got a lot of dudes. We don't need to feed all of them. So let's just let's march them forward. And it's, what? A lot of them are definitely going to die, but they don't have unlimited arrows. So we'll just keep marching and marching and marching until eventually, through attrition, we'll make it to their ranks and we'll chop them down. Which is all fine and dandy if you're the king and you're thinking of it in like this board game stratego kind of way of like, or chess, which, yeah, fuck it, get rid of the pawn, who cares? But if you're the pawn, like, how did more of these guys not revolt? I guess they didn't revolt because they knew they would just be killed. But wow, that just sucks. That sucks. Like, that's a life. If you're this guy and you're like, seriously, we're just gonna walk. You know that they're shooting arrows like 40 yards ahead. Like, you'd have to know that you'd have, I mean, like a 99% chance that you were just going to die and going to die horribly. I mean, I think about that too. Like, I would never want to die in war of any kind, but I would much rather be be shot by a heavy artillery gun or blown up than die from arrows. Because I feel like an arrow is not a quick death. I mean, if one gets you in the eye, sure. But otherwise, like, you just get an arrow in like your, I don't know, shoulder or whatever, and then you're laying there in the middle of the killing fields being like, just waiting for the next barrage of arrows, and then maybe one gets in your leg, and you're like, fucking, could you just aim a little bit closer to my face? Just get it over with. So anyway, side note, that sucks. If you ever get a time machine, don't be a foot soldier in medieval times for any king. Shitty job. Like, if you think like, man, my job sucks, dude. My boss is a dick. And, fucking health insurance is not what I want it to be. And, it's like, how come you got to wait? You got to get, there. You got to work there for a year to get your vacation. It's fucking bullshit. And maybe it is bullshit, but, less bullshitty than your job being to march to certain death. Arguably a much, much worse job. So, the Mongols, they were like, no, we're not just going to march forward into certain areas. They got these fast, they use smaller horses, and they would just kind of flank around, and then they would just do different maneuvers than these guys were used to, shooting these arrows, and they just, it slowed down how many guys you could shoot with your arrows. And then these guys were really good shots on the go, so then they would get like behind you or to the side of you and just fucking light you up. with these arrows, which had to have been terrifying for these guys to see, even more, for the guys doing the shooting, because that job would be better than advancing. Like, if you're going to pick one of the, war jobs, I would rather be the dude in a line of archers shooting at the guys marching than to be one of the guys marching, like, hands down. If they're like, hey, man, we got sign-up sheets, you can be you can be a swordsman marcher, or you can be a hangback archer. I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna focus on the bow. I'm gonna focus on my arrows. But then, you think you got the cush job, and then you see these assholes swerving around on their ponies, and and shooting like next generation. You're playing Xbox, or you're playing Super Nintendo, and they got some PS4 shit, and you're like, well, that's not fair. So that's how they did it. That was a lot of how they did it, and they just they were better at just basic strategies and stuff as well. They had like good generals and such, and then there was just momentum too, because when they would take over an area, then they would like make those guys fight for them, and so part of it was just numbers after a while too. Like, they just generally had the bigger army, and and back then, strength in numbers for sure. Like, now it's like you can overcome numbers with weaponry, but when everybody has basically the same weaponry, numbers generally going to win. Numbers plus strategy there. So okay, I bring all this up just to demonstrate that facing Genghis in 1221 was like stepping into the ring with Mike Tyson in the mid 80s. Like, going in, you have to know, like, fuck, Vegas odds are really against me. I don't know what the odds were who the odds makers were then. Maybe Sodom or something. I don't know if that was around. But if there was odds makers, you're getting like a 1 in 50, 1 in 75, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 chance of a victory. I mean, to engage was just suicide. Everyone was fucking annihilated over and over. Like, everyone had a plan. A lot of people fought back until, and they had a plan, just kind of like with Tyson, until Genghis hit him in the mouth, and then their plan fell apart. And just before Nishapur, Genghis killed between 700,000 and 1.3 million people in the sack of Merv, another Persian Silk Road trading city, kind of down the road, because Nishapur was in modern-day Iran, along the Silk Road of Marco Polo fame. And it was like, there was a fair amount of cities in that area along this well-traveled road of, people bringing goods back and forth between Asia and Europe. And they heard him coming. Like, Merv was sacked after Merv refused his messenger's request to hand over their most beautiful women and bow down to his rule. And that, which is typical. I mean, basically, like, that was kind of the deal he would make you. His basic policy: he would send emissaries to your city, tell you to surrender, give him, give him some of your beautiful women in his clan, fight for him in future battles, hand over your most skilled tradesmen and artists to work for his empire, give him a large chunk of your royal wealth as tribute, and let him kill a few of your people, maybe even some royals possibly, to kind of test your obedience, make sure you didn't fight back. And if you didn't like that policy, if you didn't like basically giving him all of your best stuff, letting him be your ruler, you're no longer the ruler if you're in power at the time, and let him, kind of selectively just kill some people as like a test. If you're like, that's I don't like that at all. That's plan A. Plan B was he would kill everyone, just to kind of, other than maybe a few of the best craftsmen, a few of the best artisans, but everybody else fucking die, surrender or die. That was kind of their unofficial motto. And they were so feared that there's these historical tales of lone Mongol soldiers riding into villages, just kind of executing peasants at random as a test of loyalty, and basically daring the rulers of these villages to fight back. And a lot of times they wouldn't, because they knew if they killed that Mongol soldier, if that guy didn't come back with a report to his camp, then the whole camp would come to their village and just fuck shit up, like really aggressively attack. And that was part of their strategy, actually, was to spread fear throughout the land. Fear that I'm sure reached Nishapur. And revenge was a common motivation. Describing the revenge extracted by Genghis Khan for the killing of several Mongol trainers, this ancient scholar Juni wrote, "In retribution for every hair on their heads, it seemed that 100,000 heads rolled in the dust." I mean, these dudes were scary. An Arab chronicler Ibn al-Athir wrote, "In the countries that have not yet been overrun by them," meaning the hordes, "everyone spends the night afraid that they might appear there too." And as scary as they were, though, they weren't generally torturers, which I don't know if it was unusual per se, but there was a fair amount of these empires back then that would, like Vlad the Impaler type stuff, would really torture you. Like Vlad the Impaler would, put thousands of people on poles, like impaled, like up through them, watch them bleed out, as he would he was known to snack, just eat a fucking sandwich, helped his digestion, I guess, to watch people suffer extremely. Which to me that's almost scarier in a way, but he just you just knew you were going to die. I think the really scary thing about the hordes was how much they dominated. Like Vlad and some of the other guys really were terrifying too. But I feel like maybe you thought you have a chance to kind of defeat them, more realistic chance, more realistic odds. But they did do some scary stuff. Like this one historian, J.J. Saunders of the Mongols, said, this is a quote of his, "There is something indescribably revolting in the cold savagery with which the Mongols carried out their massacres. The inhabitants of a doomed town were obliged to assemble in a plain outside the walls, and each Mongol trooper armed with a battle axe was told to kill so many people, 10, 20, or 50, and then, as proof that the orders had been properly obeyed, the killers were sometimes required to cut off an ear from each victim, collect the ears in sacks, and bring them to their officers to be counted. A few days after the massacre, troops were sent back into the ruined city to search for any poor wretches who might be hiding in holes or cellars. They were dragged out and slain as well." They had sacks of ears. That is the most... I've watched a lot of shows like Dexter and things where you got these serial killers. No one's gone that far. There was a Jack the Ripper. There wasn't, Johnny Earsack. Johnny Earsack would be the most terrifying. If it sounds like an urban legend. It sounds like something people would scare kids back in ancient times. Like, yeah, well, hey, you eat your food, Billy, or old Johnny Earsack. He's gonna come over and take your ear as tribute and cut your fucking head off. Okay, so eat your porridge unless you want your ear to go in the sack. I mean, but that was some dude's reality. There was a lot of dudes. There was these soldiers, and what's weird about it is they killed so many towns that they just got so jaded towards it. It's just like human nature. At first, it's got to be a little weird to be. Oh God, I can't. It's so horrific to like a real person to kill them, and then cut their ear off, and then and then you cut so many ears that your knife is a little dull, and you got to sharpen your ear knife. And then you throw them into a sack. That is the grossest thing. And then you bring this sack of ears, and then I guess you dump it on a table, and it's here they go. Here's your ears. And there was probably some Mongols that were lazy. There had to be an occasional lazy Mongol. It's fucking 50. I got to kill 50 dudes. My arm's tired from killing the last village. I'm going to kill 25 dudes, and I'm going to take both ears and just put both of those in the sack and hope they don't notice that there's a lot of lefts and a lot of rights. There was other people. There was probably conversations, two soldiers walking back to some, to the counting station, each with a sack of ears, and just being like, "So what? So how's your wife? How's the kids? Ah, it's good. Oh, hey, oh shit. God dang it. I gotta hold on. Wait up. I just I dropped there's a hole in my sack. I just noticed I dropped a couple of ears, so I'm gonna go back and pick those up. So I hit my quota. Unbelievable. This has happened. This has happened. Okay. But again, he wasn't a torturer, so I guess somehow that's the bright side. So that's Genghis. So I know it's gory, but I'm painting a picture of this is Genghis. And he is down the road from Nishapur in 1221. And before we get into why he went so crazy on them, because the whole head pyramid thing that I referenced earlier, that was not the norm. That was not the norm. And not the norm for him to kill basically everybody in a city of that size. I think even in Merv, I think he did spare a few people. I don't know, maybe not. But the head pyramid just makes it crazier. So here's Nishapur. I hadn't heard of it. It's an ancient city, northeastern Iran, a few 100,000 today. Origins go back to at least 3rd century AD, if not all the way back to pre-recorded history. There's just, it's for the archaeologists to debate over how long there was a human settlement there. It meant the fair, good city of Shapur was part of the Sasanian Empire, the last Persian Empire to precede the rise of Islam, one of the major empires of the world for over 400 years. During the time of the Romans, it was religion initially was Zoroastrianism, ancient pre-Islamic religion of Iran that survives kind of there in isolated areas and more prosperously in India today, where the descendants of the Zoroastrian Iranian kind of immigrants are known as Parsis. So it's actually an ancient religion that goes back 2,000 years BC and influenced Judaism, Gnosticism, Christianity, Islam with its kind of notions of messianism, heaven and hell, free will. Variety of rulers and shorter-lived dynasties took over the area around Nishapur. So there was like turnover and kind of rulers, but it saw like very little major bloodshed. There was a couple, big battles, but nothing like that was going to come up in 1221. And they had some earthquake problems, kind of referenced in the last episode too. They kind of had their own big one a few generations before 1221 that was kind of like the quake in 1906 of San Francisco. Like it did a lot of structural damage. I mean, a lot of people did die in that, but they quickly rebuilt it. Like they were always able to recover quickly until the Mongols got there. And it was a good place to live by everything I read, everything I found. Where it was a fertile plain, well irrigated. They had really good irrigation for their day. Farming flourished. Their silk weaves were known throughout the modern world. They had a walled city center surrounded by walled suburbs. It was fucking dope, It was like an ancient San Francisco. They were very cosmopolitan, very tolerant. After the Muslims took over, they very tolerant of other religions. There was an ancient form of Christianity that was still like an Eastern form that was allowed there. Judaism was allowed there, and for the most part, they had the taxes and different things and different rulers, but it was a very prosperous, well-educated, full of a lot of artists, a lot of poets. Like it sounded like a very cool place to live. And it goes back and forth. Nobody really understands exactly how many people were there. Accounts vary from 170,000 to 1.7 million. So, regardless of a big cosmopolitan city, and they're doing great. In 1220, life is good, and then Genghis Khan shows up, and here's why he got so mad at this battle. What happened was, like as I described early, they would send emissaries early on to kind of ask you to bow down. And the little emissaries initially who came didn't want to. They loved their city. They thought foolishly, like many cities before them, that they would be fine. And Genghis Khan, by the way, I remember reading this. I didn't mention this earlier, but he never lost. Like his record he was undefeated. There was one group that gave him problems in Russia. This I'm blanking on the name. But there was like one, but then he he went back, like the Bulgars, I think it was the Bulgars, but then he went back and squashed them later. So it's like, he had one maybe fight that was like a draw, and then he went back a couple years later and, whooped their ass. So it was crazy that, and everybody would hear about these, word would get out, but still, I get it from the ruler's part, like they don't want to give up control. But the peasants were like, can we please maybe negotiate with them? Please don't hurt the emissaries, please. Like they knew. So he sends this emissary, and one of them is his favorite son-in-law. Goes there, Tagashar's his daughter's husband, and that dude gets killed in a little skirmish during the initial part of like, hey man, just give us all your stuff. And that's what set it off. So she got really upset and she begged her dad to just kill everyone. She wanted the whole city decimated and she wanted their heads piled into pyramids. That was her request. And I'm going to read you, this is from a book that I lost the reference, unfortunately. I actually erased it, but this is a book on historical accounts that I was able to find on Genghis Khan that goes into more detail of what's happening here. So, famous as the city of the great poet, this is Nishapur, and polymath Omar Khayyam, renowned for his religious scholars and a center of Sufism, Nishapur was a wealthy city with fields of rice and cereals, its carpet making and distinctive ceramics, its cotton factories, glass blowing, manufacture of metal and stone vessels, musical instruments, turquoise mines in the suburbs, sumptuous houses, exquisite gardens, general opulence. Like it was fucking sweet, like a paradise of the times. Possibly the most beautiful city in all Iran, certainly in Muhammad's empire, Nishapur was a watery delight 12 canals, 70 water mills, bringing the precious liquid to a population of some 170,000. Again, that's debatable. This is one book. It fluctuates wildly as far as at least that many people or quite bigger. It was harmed in 1208 by a calamitous earthquake, but poor Nishapur can have had little conception of the hell that was now to descend on it. Once the citizens saw the size of Tulu's army, and Tulu was the son-in-law. They sent envoys, both imams and oligarchs, to ask for terms, but Tulu was constrained by Genghis's rage over Takwar and his code of vengeance, so could offer him nothing. Okay, a little confused about that. But in the case of the Nishapurians, had done themselves no favors since, before Tulu's arrival, they had been attacking Mongol outriders and scouting parties. So they were getting into these skirmishes, and the ferocity of the Mongol onslaught was such that, though better defended than Merv, it lasted just 3 days. And the 3 days is also debated. Sometimes some scholars see as quickly as 1 day. But what they're saying here is the Battle of Nishapur, April 1229, began with a furious cannonade, and from both sides, Nishapur's defenses included 3,000 javelin-throwing ballistae and 500 catapults. So they did have, they had their shit together. They were, for their day, an organized army. This walled city. But the Mongols brought the same number of catapults and ballistae, and they had 700 naphtha-hurling trebuchets, 4,000 scaling ladders, 4,000 of those ladders to run up against the wall, 250,000 large stones for the trebuchet to the catapult and stuff to get thrown against the wall, 2,500 sacks of earth for filling up moats. That's fucking incredible, man, how efficient they were. Think about it, man, they had sacks of dirt to fill up the moats. I mean, these guys, terrifying, just the efficiency of this army. And all-out assault ordered by Tului on all four quarters of this city. So I'm sorry, Tului is not the son-in-law. I don't. His fucking name doesn't matter. This isn't about him. Not really. It's just about what happened. So some dude. The assault lasts an entire day and night. 66 breaches in the walls. Just over 24 hours, a brigade of 10,000 Mongols was inside the city. The inevitable result was a ferocious street fighting where every house was contested, every block involved in bloody hand-to-hand combat. Think about that. Oh my God. I'm going to get back to that in just a second. The battle inside the city began on a Wednesday, was finally completed by Friday night. Since more and more Mongols continued to pour through the breach, there could be only one ending. By Saturday morning, Mongol death squads were roaming the streets, including a special corps of killers led in person by, it was Takwachar, there we go. That was the son-in-law. Led in person by the widow. Oh my God. So she came in with this death squad at the end, screaming for vengeance. The resulting massacre lasted a full 4 days. As at Merv, survivors tried to hide among the bodies in the rubble, but most were winkled out, executed. Oh my God. Others died of starvation and thirst in their caverns as they hid in subterranean hideouts. And then the Mongols piled up 3 pyramids of skulls from men, women, and children, respectively. Oh my God, they had one pyramid for the dudes, one for the women, one for the kids' heads. A whole pyramid of kids' heads. That's not something I'm making up. This isn't a Stephen King novel. Obedient to Genghis's orders that no living thing was to be spared, the killers even wiped out dogs, cats, and rats. Oh man, it even sucked to be a rat in Nishapur that day. And then out of the population of 170,000, and I'm going to go plus, 400 hand-picked artisans survived, which was typical Mongol fashion. They're like, okay, you got a really good skill we can make some money off of. You didn't have anything to do with this. All right. We're going to because you're really good at this thing. We don't need more peasants, but you can live. Holy shit. I mean, think about that. I mean, imagine this now. Now this is it's like you live in San Francisco. Let's say we're going to go West Coast. You live in San Francisco, and this very cosmopolitan city where, it's not about fighting. It's about art and culture. And then you hear about some dipshits in Canada. Those fucking ferocious Canadians. The Canadian horde. A bunch of Canadians on horseback they burn Seattle to the ground. And then they just obliterate Portland. And then they get Sacramento. Excuse me. And they get all these cities. And now they've sent some people after all that. You've heard about all this. And now they've come to your town, and then they're like, hey man, surrender, or you know what we're gonna do. And then you got some dipshit mayor who's like, oh, no, buddy. We're San Francisco. We don't fucking, we do what we want, okay? We're smart, city. We like our life here. And why don't you go fuck yourself? And you know what? That guy, the important guy, the leader of this horrific army, we're going to kill his son-in-law, okay? So get out of here. Go on, scat. And then you're just some citizen of this place, and you're like, oh, God. Like, that can't be good. Like, you know, like if we're going to go Trump, you know, it'd be like if Trump, you know, just pissed off, like dropped some bombs just for fun on like China and Japan and North Korea and Russia and Britain and just was like fucking with everybody. And then all those people are now coming towards us. And you're just a citizen going like, God damn it, dude, why did you do that? They're going to kill all of us now. And then all of a sudden you just see this horde coming. And at this point, you know that there's no surrendering. Like there's no like, sorry, can I be on your side? You know, like, and if you don't have a skill, if you're like, I'm good with a shovel, nope, you're fucked. And then they're assaulting the city just systematically, just ladder after ladder after ladder, and dirt and the moats and rock after rock after rock hitting your wall. And then all of a sudden these Mongols pour into the city, you know? I mean, I guess, you know, you wouldn't have the walls and stuff like that, but like San Francisco, like into the suburbs, you know, through Oakland. You know, they fucking annihilate Oakland, and now they're coming across the bridges. And you have to get out of your, you know, you have to leave Starbucks and hop out of Pete's Coffee or, you know, whatever little cafe, you know, you're leaving and you're heading out from your loft and you got your stick. These guys have much better weapons and guns, and it's better to, even though it's modern, to go with the swords. And these like maniacs with swords and arrows are coming for you, and you have to like just try to fight, and you know you're gonna die. You know you're gonna die. And then what if you're like one of the last ones to die, and you just see them hacking heads off everybody? Unfucking believable. And incredibly, after all this, other cities afterwards still fought back. Still were like, no, we know what you did to Nishapur, but we're gonna think that we can fight back too. And I just bring all this up, kind of and do this episode like the bit I wrote earlier, just to point out that we have it better today, regardless of like in our current, you know, political landscape, if it's Hillary or Trump. It's not going to be. It might be bad. Things might get worse, but they're not going to get Nishapur worse. Like, I feel like I can very confidently say that in my lifetime, no matter how long, there is not going to be, I am not going to see a pyramid of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of human heads. I'm not going to see a city just raised in that manner. And I know that we've done more recent atrocities, you know, not to make light of like, you know, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But again, I would rather look up in the sky and see a bomb coming and be like, shit. And then have, you know, I don't know, 10 seconds of panic and then just blast wave, nuclear, just incinerate me. You know, if I had to pick, I'd way rather have that than to look, you know, I'm in Santa Monica right now recording this, than to look down Santa Monica Boulevard and just see 10,000 motherfuckers on horses who are the most ruthless people in existence. I've heard about them my entire life. Like riding boogeymen coming for me, like my fear of like clowns, it would be equivalent to like 10,000 clowns on horseback with swords, like evil, like Pennywise motherfucker, and just coming, and they're gonna cut the heads off my family. So, you know, next time you're like, man, I can't get this app to load. Or, goddamn, Skype keeps on. I don't know who's using Skype. FaceTime, you know, oh, man, it's FaceTime. I gotta call Comcast again. It's just like something's wrong with my signal. Fuck, I hate this shit, man. It's just life is so hard. No, it's not. Not nearly as much as it used to be. Okay. So top 5 takeaways. No matter how bad your job is, not as bad as having to gather a sack of ears. That's number 1. Number 2, no matter what tragedy you've experienced, at least it didn't involve everyone you've ever loved or known having their heads cut off and stacked into pyramids in your home reduced to rubble, as I just explained. Number 3, Genghis Khan is interesting. It's an interesting read. interesting to read about him, but doesn't sound like a guy you would ever want to meet or even be related to. He obviously loved his family, but, if you're his son or daughter, you're expected to be part of this colossal bloodlust. That's your destiny. No thanks. Number 4, as I just said, life is infinitely better today than it was in the 13th century. And number 5, careful around horses. If they can kill Genghis Khan, they can kill your ass as well. And after all that, thanks for listening to this Timesuck. It ran a little bit longer than I would like. But if you like it, do me a favor, man. Talk about it. Tell your friends. Rate it wherever you listen to it. So, it takes a second to give it a little rating so others can see your rating and decide to listen to it as well. I really enjoy doing this. I want to do it for a long time. I'm into it. I hope you're into it. And keep coming back. And if you want to reach me, like with a question about one of the shows, maybe some historical thing I got wrong, something you thought I should have added, a question you have, man, don't hesitate. Leave a comment on my Facebook page, Dan Cummins Comedy, Instagram, Dan Cummins Comedy, Twitter, etc. You can just go to dancummins.tv or timesuckpodcast.com to find links to all of that, or just email me directly, dan@dancummins.tv. And the final thing, don't aspire to go out there building any head pyramids, okay? It's old news. It's been done. And whatever you do not stop listening to Timesuck.